In our last class, we had looked into what is predicate is. Now in this video, we will define what is quantifier. Quantifier is one which is used to quantify the nature of variable such as all, some, none or one. Let us consider some example to understand what quantifier actually means. Now just observe the statement, all birds have wings, some men are tall, no air balloon is perfectly round in shape. For every integer x, x square is non-negative number. There exists a real number whose square is equal to real. Now, if we just look these propositions function, you would observe the word all, some, no, for every, there exist is nothing but the quantifiers which is used to quantify the nature of the variable. So what basically is quantification? To create a proposition from a proposition function is quantification. So there are two types of quantifiers we will look in detail. One is universal quantifier, the next is existential quantifiers. So now, as we have understood by an example that the statements that involve certain words such as all, some, no one, there exist, every that are associated with idea of a quantity, such words are called quantifier. So there are two types of quantifier, one is universal and one is existential. So let us look into both individually. The expression all is a universal quantifier. We denote it by for every x. The following phrases have the same meaning as all, which actually means the same as for all x, for every x, for each x, everything x, each thing x, such that. So now what is existential quantifier? The existential quantifier is being expressed when you see the word called some, few, right? So is the existential quantifier. We denote it by there exists x. The following phrases have the same meaning as some. For some x such that, there exists x such that, there is at least one x such that. So now there is a domain that is been associated with these variable, and now let us look into what is that domain or the domain of discourses. A domain specifies the possible value of the variable under consideration. To understand this, just look into the example. Let P of x be the statement x plus 1 greater than or equal to x. So now let us define what is my domain here. My domain is set of all positive integers. So when I talk about set of all positive integers, it means from 1, 2, 3, etc. So now when I specifically replace my x by 1, I get 1 plus 1, which is actually equal to 2, and that is true. And when I replace my x by 2, you see that 2 plus 1, which is 3, is greater than 2, right? So now we would conclude that for this proposition function, how symbolically I am denoting it. For every x p of x is true under the domain of positive integers. So now you would have understood that how important is to specify the domain of discourse, without which universal quantification of a statement actually cannot be defined at all. So now we will just try representing the statements in symbolic form using quantifiers. So let us have this first statement, writing the following statement in symbolic form using quantifier. The first statement, A is something is good, B everything is good, nothing is good, and something is not good. So now the very first thing which we are supposed to do is we need to consider our proposition function. So how should we consider this proposition function? When we read these statements, we should be able to identify our subject or a variable and what is associated with this variable or a subject, that statement. For example, here I consider x is good. So this x is nothing but the variable or the subject, and this is good is the predicate that is associated with that variable. So now, how should I write or define my proposition function? So here we are able to observe that this predicate actually belongs to one subject. So it can be written as, say, g of x. Now here we would say that g is the predicate and x is the variable, right? So now we will just look into that how using this proposition function we can symbolize our statement A, B, C and D. So now let us look into the first statement. The first statement is nothing but something is good. So now we would try rewriting this statement first. When I say something is good, we can rewrite this statement as looking up into what is a quantifier. The quantifier here is something. So something could be represented by some, few, there exists at least, right? So keeping this in mind, now I just restate my first statement as there is at least one x. There is at least one x such that x is good. So now, how should I symbolize it? I would symbolize it as there exists x can be written as the symbol there exists x and it is g of x, right? So now, let us move into the second one. The second one is nothing but everything is good, right? So how could you rewrite the statement everything is good? Everything is good could be restated as, when I look into the quantifier everything, it denotes for all. So I say for all x such that x is good, right? So now how can I symbolize it? I can symbolize it for all can be written as for every x g of x. And now let us look into the third statement. So before we symbolize, you try to understand it in a simple statement or rephrase it or rewrite it so that it becomes easy for you to identify the quantifier and hence symbolize it. So the third one is nothing is good. Nothing is good could be rephrased as everything is not good, right? You could understand it as everything is not good. And in a simpler way, you can also rephrase it as for all x, everything means, what does everything means? Everything means for all x. So for all x such that x is not good. Now, if you just look into this simpler version of your rephrasement, you would be able to rephrase it in a simpler way as for every x negation g of x. So for all x, x is not good. So I use the negation and I use the proposition function g of x. Now look into the next one, that is the last. Something is not good. So here the quantifier is something is not good. So just understand that how could we rephrase this in a simpler way. You say there is at least one x such that x is not good, and we can symbolize it with for there exists means you can write it by the symbol there exists x negation g of x. So now I think you would have understood that how quantifier has to be symbolized. So now we will look into the second example where we represent the statement into a symbolic form using our quantifier. But in my first example, we would see that our proposition function was only one. What if you have more than one proposition function? And so, how is this universal and existential quantifier has to be symbolized? We can just understand that using this one example. So here, when you just look into this example, it should be very much clear that how are you going to identify that this is not a proposition but a proposition function. These words all, no, some actually gives you the hint that these are something related to my proposition function. So when there is a proposition function, that means a variable x has to be defined. So that variable x is nothing but this men. You can represent this x as your men. So to this variable, are you able to associate a predicate or a property? So for this men, the property is or good. You would see that there is something, a statement called are good. So with this understanding that you are able to observe that the given statement goes into the concept of quantification, and there is a variable that you are able to identify, and you are also able to associate a predicate to it, then how would you go up into converting these four statements into the quantifier form? Before that, let us now consider our proposition functions first. So here, the first which I observe is x is a man. So here x is the variable and is a man is a predicate. So now how do I define my proposition function? The proposition function is I have one predicate with one variable, I denote it by m of x, right? So now what else do I observe? I observe that x is good. So when I say x is good, it means that I have to name it as my proposition function. So my predicate is good and the variable is one variable associated, that is g of x. Now with this two proposition functions given to you, let me just give you an idea that or an hint that when you come across your universal quantifier, that is all, every, etc., then how would you rephrase a statement? The rephrasing of the statement has to be done, or the statement has to be ensured to be written in the conditional form, that is if then form. In if then form only you are supposed to rephrase the statement. What if that you are being given a existential quantifier? Suppose you are being given a statement in existential quantifier such as few, some, etc. Then how does the rephrasement of the statement could be done? For that, you have to ensure that your propositional functions are being connected by and, right? It has to be connected by the connective and. So once we rephrase it in this one particular forms, then symbolizing becomes much more easier. So let me explain this via these statements that are given to me. So let us go into our first one, that is a, all men are good. So here all is a quantifier. So how do I restate all? All can be written as for all, and the variable I have identified is only one variable. So for all x, and when I identify that my quantifier is all, then it should strike my mind that my rephrasement statement is to be done in the conditional form only. That means I have to rephrase the statement in if and then. So how do I do it? If x is a man or men, then x is good. So now, how do I symbolize it? For all x can be symbolized as for every x. If then means the symbol arrow, and x is a men is represented by m of x, and x is good is represented by g of x. Now, similarly, Let us look into the second statement. What is the second statement? No men are good. Now, this statement that no men are good could be reframed in which way? That everyone or every man is not good. Can you rephrase it or try to understand it in this way? Every man is not good. Then how further in a simpler way this could be rephrased? Every could be represented by for all x. If x is a man, then x is not good. So now, how do I symbolize it? When I say for all x, I write it for every x. And if x is a man, then how do I write it? It is my arrow symbol, that is conditional symbol. If x is men is represented by the preposition m of x, then x is not good. Not good, not is negation, and good is the preposition function g of x. So I symbolize my second statement as for every x, if m of x, then not g of x. Now, how do you understand your third one? Some men are good. When I say some men are good, just look into that how this could be rephrased. When I talk about some, it gives me an idea that I am talking about existential quantifier. That is, there exists at least one sort. So how should I rephrase it? I can rephrase it as there is at least one x such that when I say some or existential quantifier, I have to be very much mindful that the rephrasing statement that I am doing should be rephrased with the connective and. So now, how can I rephrase the statement with and? It is x is a man, x is a man, and x is good. So now, how do I symbolize? There exists at least one x is, there exists x. Then you see these two statements are connected with and. So now you will say the first statement is m of x, second statement is g of x, right? So now if you just look into your D statement, some men are not good. So now rephrase it in a simpler way. When I say some, I have to understand that I am relating it to universal quantifier or existential quantifier. So here some comes into the category of existential quantifier, and when it is existential quantifier, I have to be consciously rephrasing this statement with the connective and. Had it been universal quantifier, I would be rephrasing the statement with the connective conditional, that is if then. So now how do I rephrase the fourth one? There is at least one x such that x is a man and x is not good. So how do I symbolize it? There exist could be symbolized by there exists x, and x is a man could be replaced by m of x, and could be written as the connective and. Is not good is a negation g of x. So in these examples, I think you would have been very much clear that how from a statement you are able to identify whether it is a proposition function or it is proposition. When in a statement you find the quantifiers such as all, some, few, every, then you have to categorize such statements into quantifier only, and you have to be very mindful that any universal quantifier has to be rephrased with the statement of if then, and any existential quantifier has to be rephrased with the connective and. I hope you would have understood this basic concept, and see you next in a set of example where we would now look examples where more than two variable if are being given to you in a statement, then how are you supposed to quantify it and rephrase the statement. So see you all into the next video.